Welcome back to Hex Ed Oz, where the sexiest thing you can be is a massive nerd. I'm your host and, lecturer, Chris, and today I want to gush just a bit about the LARP from which 90% of my experience stems, Scy'kadia. I want to discuss how it came to be, what it's like, the sort of characters you might meet there, and finish with just a dollop of lore, for flavour. Let's begin. A long time ago, in the year 2015, your host found himself without a local LARP to attend. I've been to several at this stage, including Clans of Elgart and Age of Strife, but the organisers of these events had largely been forced to close up shop and deal with real life. Alas. Though I wasn't about to leave the LARP itch unscratched, I suspected there were others in the community who, like me, wanted the hobby to continue, and I wanted to help. So, with a bit of free time on my hands, I started to draft up the world and rules for Scy'kadia, taking inspiration from the games I'd already attended, but adding my own preferential spin and as many original mechanics as I could. With feedback and assistance from several good friends, including Jonathan Whitfield and Lynn Hewitt of No LARPing Matter, we were able to pull together a simplistic rule set, a compendium mentioning the various realms and peoples within the setting, and then we ran our first game, with 20 or so attendees. Humble beginnings, to be sure. As the years have passed, our rules have expanded and been fine-tuned, our lore has been built up immensely, and attendance has grown to over 100 at each bi-weekly event, which runs as follows. Our players create a character, obviously, and our storyteller team work to devise a series of conflicting objectives and sub-objectives, some influenced by the events of previous games. Depending on the allegiances they form, our players will then gain access to some objectives while actively working to prevent other players from achieving theirs. This makes our games very much PvP or player versus player. Combat is optional, but often sought after, and the extent to which players swing swords or solve their problems with words is dependent on the players themselves. Along the way, players will encounter an occasional puzzle, random NPC encounter, or mystery laid out by the storytellers, but sometimes managed mid-game by what we call arbiters, veteran players who act as community leaders, mediators, and referees. Our games take place in a single portion of Scy'kadia called Guardian Vale, a magically obfuscated valley in a region called the Weft, essentially the heart of the setting. The characters of Guardian Vale are largely split across 5 major encampments, each led by one of our storytellers in the guise of a quest-giving mentor figure. Each encampment has a theme, and various factions of adventurers working to protect it. Tavern Town is a commercial hub, and its loyalists are folk who value rules, civilization, and civilian safety. The Clan are a collective of bandits, raiders, and misfits who prefer to live by their own personal code. The Circle is a gathering of intellectuals, explorers, and magical dabblers, as likely to break time by accident as they are to make a beneficial discovery. The Camp of Shadow is a cult dedicated to the 9 demon lords of ruin, the Scy'kadian equivalent of hell. Lastly, the Camp of Light are heroes. At least they think they are, dedicated to foiling ruinous schemes on behalf of the distant greater gods. Not all characters fall into one of these camps, but swearing to one offers greater reward for most at the cost of inheriting some default enemies. When making a character, our players are able to choose a species and the realm from which they hail. The species available are based on common D&D options: humans, elves, orcs and dwarves, half-elves and half-orcs. Rather than Aasimar, tieflings or genasi, we allow for Nephilim, Cambions, and Elementari. There are also what we term small folk, so goblins, gnomes, halflings, and pixies. Finally, there are fallen elves, undead of all stripes, and shifters, who turn into feral were-beasts during games when the blood moon is deemed full. As for the realms, the original concept was to devise places with real-world analogies and inspirations so that costuming would be made easier. Already have a Viking costume? Easy. Your character might be from Frosty Vilkland. Big anime fan with your heart set on wearing some samurai armor? Lokwe is based on the history and folklore of Far East Asia. There are also lands without specific real-world influences, such as the Fey Ring Isles of the exiled Fallen Elves, and we've ensured that every realm has just a little something uniquely Scy'kadian to set it apart from similar places in other games. Neither species nor realm affects the basic capabilities of a character, but rather leads to a different roleplay experience should you lean into your choices. For example, a dwarf of the Thunder Peaks will, knowing the lore, dislike elves and orcs on principle. Likewise, an orc from the Ride might have never seen a ship before, and this gives the player a nudge that perhaps when shown the image of a ship, they should be surprised, confused, or struck with awe. As for what they can do mechanically, players are allowed to apply a template to their character, each template having 3 tiers that are earned simply by attending enough games. It is possible to multi-class, but no character can ever have more than 3 tiers in total. The templates are Warrior, Thief, Assassin, Learned Mage, Conduit Mage, and Healer. Warriors don't get many special abilities, but they are allowed to wear heavier armor, carry bigger shields, and they're tough as all hell even without their gear. A player wishing to engage in lots of combat should seriously consider playing a warrior. Thieves may attempt to pickpocket other players, allowing them to steal key items or currency without having to outfight anyone, so long as they're sneaky about it. Assassins can slow down opponents, take them out in a single strike, and poison lots of people. But just like a thief, they need to be sneaky, or else great at making a getaway. Learned Mages start play with 3 choices from our list of 18 lesser spells. Conduit Mages start play with only 1 choice, but they get more uses of the spell per game. Healers must choose a deity from which to draw their rejuvenating power, and their choice comes with various expectations. A healer of Gorgos, the demon lord of murder, might be expected to spill blood as often as they give life, while a healer of Balroth, god of bravery, might lose their powers should they shy away from a challenge. Alternatively, players with health issues preventing them from fighting, or simply no desire to swing a weapon, can play one of 3 civilian templates. In this case, they can only achieve 2 tiers total, but they're off limits as far as striking goes. The civilian templates are Merchant, Entertainer, Mystic. Merchants can sell and loan out items that buff combatant characters or bestow additional powers. Entertainers, which encompasses artists as much as bards, can magically charm folk or inspire them with extra toughness. Mystics often receive cryptic hints to help with solving major objectives, but they can also tell fortunes and bestow random immunities to their listeners. Because our games run once a fortnight, hectic Australian weather permitting of course, death of player characters is kept intentionally rare. Though it does happen, it usually comes about as a result of long-running plot arcs, because the player has opted to have their character killed off in a process we call coup de grace, or through a player buying in to a lethal encounter, having been warned prior, of course. This lends our stories an episodic feel, where long-term rivals come and go, and familiar faces are always bound to resurface. It also allows for our players to form lengthy, meaningful connections with the characters their friends portray. Not to mention, it prevents players having to buy a whole new costume every couple of weeks. Honestly, we try to keep the cost of participation down as much as humanly possible. Aside from character creation and basic combat, thanks to years of player feedback and troubleshooting, our rules now encompass crafting items, performing rituals, torture, and a wealth of other details, making them seem complex or even daunting at first glance. However, we've designed the game in such a way that listening to another player and using common sense is usually all you need to get by. They threw a blue ball at you and yelled freeze? Safe to assume you should freeze in place, yeah? Speaking of magic, I'm particularly fond of our magic system, which we call the chant system. Each lesser spell requires a certain number of magic words. A caster must say these words loudly, often a poem or incantation they wrote themselves, followed by the name of the spell. As they call the name of the spell, they must make a gesture or throw a coloured tag packet to indicate what they've just cast. If they forget their chant halfway through, they must start again. If struck by a weapon or an enemy spell halfway through, they must start again. More powerful spells, called rituals, are cast in a similar fashion, but they cost the caster some health and also require the expenditure of components discovered during play. The storyteller character I play myself is a combination of mage and thief, and I have a heck of a time just vanishing from sight only to filch an important item and charm the owner to cluck like a chicken. All in good fun, I assure you. As for the lore of Scy'kadia, well, here's where you'll have to forgive me, as it's near and dear to my heart and I might get a bit carried away. Essentially, thousands of years ago, an unknown people called the Weftaril came to the world of Geth upon which Scy'kadia rests. They harnessed magic, the living energy of Geth, arguably the world's soul, to power the portals linking their empire together. During its captivity, magic developed sentience and was driven mad, with violent shards of itself breaking away and running amok among the various primitive mortal species. This is how demons came to be. It is said that the Weftaril were ashamed of the horror they'd unleashed and cast a mighty ritual that shattered their empire but formed a prison realm for the demons, an extra-dimensional place called Ruin. Despite their efforts and subsequent disappearance, the Weftaril only hindered the demons, who were still able to prey on mortals. So along came the greater gods, spirits of the natural world, embodiments of various virtues and processes, and they led the mortals to war against Ruin. Even this wasn't enough. Though the gods and their new worshippers herded the demons into their prison, the souls of the dying were still at risk. So the gods, barring one who had been devoured during the war, formed heavens for their followers, where the most devout could be called to safety. They named these heavens the Holds, and each god took up residence in one, their collective power much diminished in the effort. What followed was a series of ages. An age in which the elves, now acting as magic's chosen children and custodians, ruled the world. An age in which the orcs, having lost their god, turned to worshipping 9 rising lords within Ruin and tore down the spires of elfdom. An age when dragons scorched the land and humans first learned the higher limits of sorcery. An age of arcane human warlords enslaving their own kind, while the other mortal species retreated into seclusion. An age where, having slain or exiled their magical abusers, humanity formed stable fiefdoms. An age when undead swarmed the fledgling realms and drew all into a century of bitter warfare. And finally, the age in which our adventurers now live. The time of uncertainty, where the human realms are rebuilding their strength, inhumans are venturing forth once again, and the portals of the long-lost Weftaril are beginning to open. So there you have it. A primer on what we do at Scy'kadia and a little taste of the setting itself. I really hope you liked it as much as I enjoyed talking about it. Oh, and I almost forgot, if anyone listening to this wants to attend a Scy'kadian event that take place every fortnight in Rooty Hill, Sydney, Australia. Barring that god's awful Aussie weather I mentioned. If you want to find out more about the group, about the rules, about the lore, all you have to do is go to Facebook, type in Scy'kadia, and join the group, not the page. Although giving the page a like would be nice too. Cheers. I've been Chris. This has been Hex Ed Oz, and I hope to catch you again real soon. Bye!